I look like my mother.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Branding Your Building, Tips for Beating New Construction at Its Own Game, presented by Cooperator Events and sponsored by Sygrove Associates Design Group. Today, we are happy to welcome our expert panelists, Marilyn Sygrove, Sunny Rio, and Betsy Kent. Audience members, please direct your attention to the row of buttons at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can use the Q&A button to submit a question during the discussion. You're welcome to include your name and location in your question or to remain anonymous. Please also be advised that the views and opinions expressed in today's discussion are those of the panelists themselves and do not necessarily reflect those of Cooperator Events or its parent company, Yale Robbins Publications. All information, content, and materials presented in this webinar are for general information purposes only and are not intended to constitute formal legal or financial advice. Again, thank you all for joining us today. Please give the panelists your attention and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. We have what we think is a very interesting new idea for you about how to get the word out on branding of your building. My colleagues that are joining me are Betsy Kent, who is a copywriting expert, which is all of the language that goes into our websites, and Sunny Rio, who is Pixel Love Design, and she is the creative director and designer. Hello. We're going to be not only having an internal discussion, but we will open this up to questions. So please feel free to ask questions. And I do have to apologize that we may not be able to get to all of your questions. So to start, how did this idea of branding existing buildings come about? Recently, I was interviewed for an online real estate publication, and specifically about lobby design, trends, what's happening now, what's happening in the future, and the word branding did come up. So after that, in working with two sets of clients, one being a building that decided that they wanted to have a name. So they actually put out the word to all of the owners in the building if they would like to offer a name for their building, because they felt that they were a mid-block building, though they were pre-war, they still needed some type of an identity. And they wound up coming up with a particular name. And if we could get that slide. Actually, what we're going to show you is about design, before and afters on design, which really is what we are doing. So I'm just going to show you a couple of pictures of projects, the before and what we did to them. So for example, this is a Hudson River view building down in Battery Park City area. And as you can see, the before photo on the top is quite different than what we had created for them. And the discussions with the client was, we wanted a sense of place. We're on the Hudson River. We have incredible views. We want water. And so we, as interior designers, worked very closely with them and came up with a water-like pattern that would be timeless, that is fresh, cool, and it's universally loved by all of the residents in this condominium. And in the next slide, we have, here's a classic Sygrove before and after scenario, where not only did we deal with creating a certain amount of function, which is, you know, the basis for our design work is solving problems, but also to come up with an aesthetic. So here the door staff is very much isolated from the rest of the lobby. And at this particular situation, the package space was very limited. So we created behind those wood panels a tremendous amount of package space for them. And that's a very hot topic, as you all know. In the next slide, this is the same building, interestingly enough, and you can see on the top the before that they were actually using a temporary screen to house not only packages, but luggage, grocery carts, things of that nature. And it clearly was not terribly appealing. And what you see in the bottom slide is on the left-hand side, we actually did behind the grill and the mirrors flipped their package space with their existing mailroom and created a mailroom and a proper seating area that gives this building its image or its brand. And our next slide is, here are some hallways. And as you can see, the chair rail was existing, but this building also is nearby Central Park, and they wanted something that was fluid with Central Park. And as you can see in the carpet pattern, it has some vine and organic motifs in it, which does give them that feeling of sense of place, which is very important. And in our next slide, this is a project that is about to go into construction. And as you can see, they have incredible trees. I believe they're American redbud on the front of the building, and they are world famous in their neighborhood, which is the Upper East Side, for these trees. And in our lobby renderings, you will see, particularly on the bottom right, that instead of putting a typical piece of a painting or a piece of artwork or some type of graphic, we had suggested, and the client loved the idea of referencing those flowers year round. So those are actually porcelain flowers that are being mounted on the wall, and that is their artwork. So, and these identities are basically the kernel of a brand. And honestly, we didn't realize it until we started to talk about this together. And Betsy and Sunny and I have worked together on creating our Sygrove website. And we started talking about this, and we realized that all of these components are being underutilized in these neighborhoods, that older buildings, existing buildings, pre-war buildings, 60s buildings, 70s buildings are not competing, though they may be competing for apartments and selling apartments, they're not competing visually with the new construction that is going up. So we'd like to talk about some of the things that happened. So I started this discussion by saying one of the buildings asked their building, let's name it. Let's give it a name. So they did come up with a name, which I thought was great. And if we should have a slide on that as well. And they decided to not just use the address, but to kind of come at it from a different angle, kind of the cool angle of the 350, even though it's a pre-war building. But the typeface, the colors, the black and white, the line, all of these things are an identity for the building. And if we go to the next slide, we as designers, and this is just a collection of all of the different signage that we do in our buildings. So here is another opportunity for creating a brand, sending a message, and that's incredibly important. So I'd like to turn this over to Sunny, and she can explain a little bit, and please don't leave us at the end of this, because we have an exciting bit of news to share with you. So hang on, and Sunny, take it away.
Thank you, Marilyn. Just wanted to say thank you to all of you for joining us, and I hope everybody is well and safe. So we wanted to talk about, what exactly residential branding is, and simply put, it's really about the thought and process behind bringing architecture, interior, and graphic design together to create this full and cohesive identity for residential developments. And using brands as a means of identification, as Marilyn explained, has become very important in this very competitive marketplace today. We can walk down any block in New York City, and it's very hard not to notice just how heavily branded these new developments are today, and there are very good reasons for that. So we just wanted to share a couple of, one second here, my apologies. So we wanted to share a couple of website examples that we've pulled up from new construction. And as you can see, they are, really gorgeous. The typography that they select, the imagery, just the way everything is laid out, that really embodies the brand of these new developments. So we have a couple of examples here. And it's really about creating the essence of the brand. And you'll notice that they all, vary stylistically. And basically, it's really about creating a brand that will be appealing to the potential buyers. This is really the target audience for your brand. Now, consumer expectations. Oh, I'm sorry. Before I jump into the consumer, just to give you a little background story of why these residential developments started being branded, is because developers that have succeeded in the hotel sector, they have basically applied these lessons that they learned to the residential developments. Helping to create individuality and also exclusivity. And, the global wealth is only expanding, and undoubtedly the demand for high quality residential development properties will also rise. So these clever branding strategies will only be maintained in the future. Basically, the times have changed and this is no longer a trend. It's almost a necessity. Now, there have also been a shift in the consumer expectations. It's not a groundbreaking statement to say that these buyers are attracted to good design. We are constantly exposed to good design, whether it's through social media, or if we think about these buyers, we'd like to think of them as very well-traveled as well. And just to back up our argument here, there has been a research done by an estate agent called Knight Frank. The research is called Branded Developments, and this was done back in 2012. Ooh, sorry, I'm just gonna show a slide here.
That's the hardest part of doing
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys.
Well, while Sunny's bringing that up, I think one of the things that I think is important to know is when you go to Street Easy or Zillow or one of these sites to look for an apartment or to sell your apartment, you're not seeing much. And what's a shame, or really a crime, is you may be spending, we're interior designers, we're the ones that are designing your lobbies, your hallways, your amenity spaces. And you've spent a lot of money, whether it's been assessed, whether it's been refinanced, whether you have a good reserve fund. The fact is you've spent good money and it's not going out there. It's not being publicized. You're not benefiting from it by not getting the word out. And that's either if you're going to be selling your apartment or if you're going to be gifting or having someone in your family inherit your apartment. Your property value is key, and that's a big part of everyone's assets. So I think it's very important. So Sunny, I'm sorry, now that you got your slide up.
No, all good. So you can see here that, and I quote, branded residences command an average uplift of 31% compared to equivalent non-branded schemes. These are based on actual numbers that they found in the research study. So again, the consumer expectations are always evolving. They are attracted to good design. And also at a certain price point, buyers are looking for the complete package that spans way beyond just the four walls of the unit. They're looking for that full experience. So when we think of a buyer, that's looking for property in New York City, the buyer will most likely focus not just on the building or the unit itself, but it's really going to be about the entire neighborhood, its rich history, diversity, energy, community, music, arts. I mean, I think we can all agree that if we think of reasons why New York City is such a great place to live in, I mean, we can just go on and on and on. So branding really has a way of turning this, that full experience that they're looking for into a very cohesive package. So we like to think of it as almost like lifestyle matchmaking, if you will. Residents they're not only, seeking a place to live, but they want that emotional connection. They want to seek that feel good vibe of their new home and their neighborhood and the community. And branding can really facilitate the communication of that emotion between buyer and property. Um, so New York City is experiencing a boom in the residential development sector. And with such competition, it's more important than ever that these established residences not only stand out, amongst the direct competitors, but also against these new developments that are literally rising every day, right? Um, so we want to, come up with a cool brand identity and a high quality website that really highlights what makes your building special and unique, and with the hopes that it will really stand out amongst the competition.
So Sunny, now you're the graphics person, but
Yes.
part of this package, in addition to great interior design, getting the visuals going, are the words to bring the people in. So I'm going to let Betsy speak, and then we have a little surprise package that we're going to show.
Yes.
That was
Hey, so I'm Betsy Kent, and I am a high-level copywriter, mostly for websites. And I've worked with many businesses that are in a visual part of their business, interior designers, photographers, etc. And something that I have always had to educate them about is that their images, beautiful images of their beautiful work, are only a part of their brand. You need words to support your images. And I bring to the table a specific type of copywriting that it has an immediate impact on anything that Sunny would do. And it actually comes from what Marilyn does. And I've worked with Marilyn extensively in her own business around this. And it is, you have to be 100% totally clear about who your ideal buyer is. So that is more important than anything else in terms of the copy and content that supports the visuals. So let's say Marilyn's team comes in and completely redecorates and renovates your public spaces in your building. And then the photographer comes in and takes amazing photos. And then Sunny says, you know what, this building is so fabulous. It needs a brand and it needs images. If that's all there was, then there wouldn't be a 100% connection with the ideal buyer. The images, our brains absorb the visual, the artwork first, and secondly, the content. But the way that we work is to create content that actually has an instant connection with the ideal buyer. So for example, a buyer who wants to live on Sutton Place is not the same buyer who wants to live in Tribeca. The buyer who wants to live in Harlem is not the same buyer that wants to live on the Upper East Side, for example. So using generic content is going to lessen the impact and the connection that your building will have to its, whether it's in a brochure or a website, it all ties together. So I think this is a good time for us to show, we created a fake building to give you an example of what we're talking about. And by the way, if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A, and you might have some later on, but we're going to try to answer them as we go along. Okay, so so we created this this phony building. It's a phony building in Greenwich Village to give you an example of what we mean by applying the same tactics and the same approach that the flashy new construction has, but how does that translate into a more established vintage building in some cases, but vintage could even be white brick buildings on the Upper East Side. So Sunny created a mock-up. So keep in mind, this is not a real website. It's a fake website. Can you share it? Great. Okay. And we named it the boho. And so this is the opening view. Obviously, it is a gorgeous picture of Washington Square Park. It immediately gives the viewer an idea of where this building is in New York. And if you scroll down, okay, so this is the fake building that we created, and Sunny has done a gorgeous job at laying it out. Then it was my job as part of the team to create content that is going to take that connection further. So luxury and charm in the heart of the village. That is a very first of all, it's really approaching a very specific buyer who wants luxury, who wants charm, and wants the village. And what I'm doing here is trying to have an actual conversation with the ideal buyer, as if we're sitting in a room and they're telling us what they want. I used words such as intimacy and ambiance, the history and the lore of Greenwich Village, but with the conveniences of modern living. And in this case, this is a buyer who wants to feel like they're living in a very special place. So it's a rare find. So that and you know, this was we mocked this up really quickly, but you can see how the power of the words enhances the whole message, and the images and the color. We have created a brand for this vintage building. So you go to the next slide. And you can just scroll down. You know, when you enter the boho, you step into a bygone era. Residents are treated like royalty. Visitors are honored guests. Like, who wouldn't want that, right? And keep going. And this is very important. So buyers, people who view, there are 4 different, I'm going to go through this real quick so it doesn't get too long. But once we figure out who the ideal buyer is, then we have to understand that there are 4 different kinds of decision makers within that buyer persona. There's spontaneous, methodological. I know that's the wrong word, but I'm on a webinar. I can't think of it. Methodical, there's humanistic, and there is competitive. And competitive is an important part of a persona for buyers in New York City. And in this case, this buyer wants to feel extra special and privileged to live in this gorgeous place. Now, every website that you see from around the new construction has availability. Well, those new buildings come up and they have 200 apartments available. In a more established building, there may be 1, there may be 2, there may be none. However, we want to say to those people, click here to see if there's any units. But we say they don't come on the market that often. Now, not every single buyer for every single building is looking for this kind of feeling special and exclusivity. For this building, they are. So I hope that gives you an idea of how you can use words to connect with the very specific people who are going to see immediate value in your building and are willing and able to pay for it.
Actually, Betsy, we have a question.
Sure.
Will we be promoting clean energy and energy efficient infrastructure, solar energy, energy efficient windows, weatherproofing facades, oil to gas, etc.? So that's a great question. And for our boho building, we didn't get that specific, but I would say that in meeting with the board and the management company of each one of these buildings, we would make a checklist of the things that your particular building offers. And if your building is very strong in that particular area, that absolutely would be part of the pitch, if you will. It would be part of the appeal of your building. And Betsy, who would be the buyer that would be interested?
In the boho?
No, in an energy efficient.
An energy efficient building would be younger. And we have a whole process that we go through in order to get to that ideal persona. But just off the top of my head, I would guess, I'm not sure yet, I wouldn't be sure until I looked at all the data and the competition and everything, that it would be a younger buyer that has grown up with the pressure of knowing that the world's coming to an end if we don't do something. So it may not be the same buyer who wants to live in the boho. We don't know yet. But if it's important, if the building has made an investment in sustainability and energy efficient, and I know there's a lot of things that you have to do now that you don't have a choice in a building, then they probably did it because they believe that their ideal buyers, that's important to them. Mm-hmm. So it would definitely be covered in any content we create.
So Sunny, putting you on the spot.
Yes.
How would there be some graphic way of communicating that? Yes. I know it's putting you on the spot, but.
No, all good. So, branding is more than just a pretty logo and a pretty website, right? It's really about all those design choices that we make, and do those design choices communicate the message that we are trying to deliver to these potential buyers. So, for example, with typography, just to go back to the boho example, we got that name because Greenwich Village was known as the Bohemian capital in the early 20th century. And that's, we use that as an inspiration for our storytelling and for developing the brand. So for this particular example, we came up with a typeface that is sort of in between a classic serif and a modern sans serif font, and it was a way to kind of marry the charm of this old building with the conveniences of modern living in the village, right? So this is just one way of how we can utilize typography to really capture that essence of the brand and communicate the right message. We've also paired this typeface with a dark green hue. Color palette is another primary factor when it comes to branding. And it's just, there's a hidden message. We're kind of giving an homage to green in Greenwich Village. Just a clever way to come up with the brand as well. And, we want something that looks pretty and that looks elegant and all that. But the main word is timeless. We want to build a brand and a website that will look just as beautiful and relevant, 5, 10, 15 years from today. So it's very important not to just think about now, but the future of the brand as well.
Right. In terms of interior design of existing buildings, it is something, buildings are getting letter grades on on how energy efficient they are. And though we are, as interior designers, not impacting on every part of the building, there are areas such as the lobby and the hallways in particular that we do energy efficient lighting, whether it's LED, we're using light sensors, those types of things. Those things really aren't web material per se. I think it's really more of a checklist for the buyer to inquire with the building, as opposed to it necessarily being a tremendous amount of detailed information in the website. I mean, it could be, but I leave it to, Betsy and Sunny in terms of would those things be, if you put something in a website and you go to expense of having a website created for the building. You want to have things that are going to last for a long time. So anything that is current news, unless there is a space for it, needs to be alluded to and not as specific. So just be aware that these issues are being attended to and are alluded to in the website.
And I'm just going to jump in here. If we determine through interviewing the building and the board, et cetera, that their ideal buyer, that is very important to them as a buyer, then we can work it in by even using an image that I believe you have to have your letter grade posted in a window that can be seen from the street. Is that correct?
More and more, yes.
More. So we could have a shot of a window with the A, and if that is something that buyers are looking for, will the buyers of this specific building, we will highlight it. And like you said, a building could be fined, and that could impact everybody. So if the building is hearing about this from prospective buyers, or it's something that the building has made a big investment in and they're proud of, we certainly would include it.
Yes.
So I'd like to discuss how are the ways that this website that we've created collectively, how is that going to benefit the building? Where are we going to see it? How is it going to be used? Who's going to click on it? How is that all going to happen?
Who are you going to ask that to?
Both of you.
Okay, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a very deep background. I bring to the team this very deep marketing background, and of course, and real estate brokers tell us this. Real estate agents, brokers, that people have, when they're looking to buy, they have a tendency to go to sites like, and Marilyn mentioned Street Easy and Zillow, and every building and every apartment, except for the images of that apartment, pretty much has the same presentation. And it is absolutely daunting to go through these listings. As a matter of fact, my son lives in Brooklyn and he and his wife are moving to Manhattan, and the search was just daunting. So the thing that one of the things that we started thinking about, and I hope this answers the question, is that with Marilyn's work as a lobby and hallway interior designer and her incredible work and the thought behind it, we realized that these beautiful spaces that she creates, no one sees them unless they're in the building. And if you are looking to buy, you don't see images of those public spaces either. And that's something that is a huge part of the new developments branding and the new developments websites. Oh, look at this beautiful lobby, look at this and look at that. For more established buildings, we feel that if this building has its own presence on the web, and there's just and there's a link that can be put into a real estate platform's listing, that makes that building much more prestigious, much more memorable. And more of an experience that you can say, oh my gosh, look at this. It's right around the corner this is a view from one of the windows. This is what the lobby looks like. Wow, they have all this storage. Those things are really important. Whereas normally you would only see pictures of the apartment, unless it's new development, which then you have a link to the website and you can see all these gorgeous pictures. So what we're saying is, for more established buildings, this is an opportunity to compete on more of the same level as the new developments, with all their bells and whistles, and give them what we call this webinar, beat them at their own game. Is that what we called it? Beat them at their own game.
Yeah.
Oh, and I think that also, to your point, if there are people from out of town, out of the world, out of the country, that are looking to invest in New York City real estate, or to move to New York, they really either, and forgive me, have to connect with a broker who will be their representative, but wouldn't this be a great tool
Right.
for people in other cities looking to come into New York or anywhere? And then we don't need to be limited to New York. I mean, this could be the case in any city globally, but our backyard is New York City. And I think that's an important thing. And I think after this webinar, if you go take a look at Zillow and StreetEasy, and I'm not trying to badmouth them, but you really don't see much of the building. You're lucky if you get an old photograph, or a photograph maybe even has a barricade on it, of the exterior of the building, and that's supposed to entice you.
Right.
You want to see
And,
this.
and it, you know, as if you're, for example, if you're in real estate and you have a buyer and you say, you know, there's this incredible apartment that just came on the market in the boho. What's the boho? Oh, the boho. Go to their website, theboho.com. Imagine the power that would have, instead of saying, oh, the boho, you know, it's a building in Greenwich Village, it's on, you know, whatever street. It gives you a tool to help you help a buyer have a more immersive experience of the building than they would ever get on any of the real estate platforms.
Mhm.
So some of the attendees today may not be putting their apartment on the market right now. So we had this conversation internally about the two things that, when we design interiors for existing buildings, the two things that we do is, number one, make it a nice place for the owners and residents to come home to, but also to improve the market value of the property. Both of those really go hand in hand long term. They're not mutually exclusive, and I think that's an important fact, important item to talk about. Just because you're not selling your apartment now, you don't know what circumstances will come down the pike. And this, as well as the investment that you've made in having the interiors redesigned, is really for you long term.
Mhm.
So that's important as well.
Yeah. And just to follow up on that a little bit, going back to what Betsy had said about these websites like StreetEasy and Zillow, just from a visual standpoint, when you are constantly exposed to the same kind of images, information, and it's just an endless list of that, something happens to our brain where we almost become desensitized to this constant overexposure of the same formatting, same layout, same listings. So what branding does, it makes it memorable, right? So if we have a website for the boho and we have this online front door of your building, no pun intended, and just really give it that strong online presence, it's a way to make your brand memorable. And also through, what Betsy does and what I do through the content and the visual, we're also making sure that the messaging is always consistent, which is another factor that goes into the memory aspect of it. And through all these aspects of design, including interior, graphic, and web design, and content writing, we're also building an automatic sense of trust and security and reliability for these buyers. So we're basically establishing a personality and identity around your building. And we're starting to build that emotional connection between the buyer and the property before they even get to visit the property personally, right?
Right. So we have another comment. I just saw an apartment that's for sale, and they have pics of their apartment, the laundry rooms, lobby, and library on Zillow. But this is good information on the board. I'm on the board of my co-op. I think it is good information, and it just made me think how the power of photography. I'm not always sure that Zillow is putting professional photographs up. And I think that if you're going to, you want to maximize whatever you're selling. You want to maximize the benefit of living in your particular building. And the more information and the more quality of that information that is going out to people that are looking at this, I think is essential. So the photographer, the angles, the details, all of those things are tools for Sunny to work with in building this website. All these things that are important. Because having been in buildings and having been in laundry rooms and having been in amenity spaces and been in service elevators and things like that, I know firsthand that they are not always the most pleasant of places. So thankfully, we love what we do, and our job is to enhance as much of the building as that we can with the budget, of course, budget permitting. So thank you very much. Another question is, do you do a virtual tour, a virtual view? Great question. We haven't explored that, but we can certainly throw it out to Sunny in particular.
Yes, it seems to be a very popular trend these days. Just even as far as looking at the renderings, the beautiful renderings. So if we kind of form that into this 3D virtual reality tour and, give these potential buyers a true experience of these established buildings, then, I mean, I would say that's a big win, right? As far as making that pitch.
So you're saying virtual, you would like to add a virtual tour to a website, or you don't think it's necessary, or?
I think it's not a requirement by any means. There are ways that we can certainly capture that experience through imagery, through graphics. And, these virtual tours, I'm not going to lie, they're very expensive. So it also has a lot to do with budget as well. So it's not a make or break situation, but it will certainly help if we have something like that on the website.
And I wanted to jump in for a second. We were just talking about before, we were talking about, and Kendra who mentioned that she saw a listing on Zillow that they showed the laundry room and they showed the lobby and they showed the library, but there probably wasn't any supporting content to say our newly redone laundry room, everybody loves it. There's plenty of machines for everyone, and blah 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 blah. It just and when we went back to say an image all by itself can only tell half the story.
Yes.
So imagine that building where that apartment, obviously they're proud of their public or shared spaces. Imagine if they had their own presence on the web where they could talk about it, where the picture is nice, but if they could talk about it, it goes a lot further to engaging the potential buyer to say, I've got to go look at this unit.
Right, and that brings up the question of the value of a virtual tour versus a more traditional website with images.
Mhm.
And I bring that up because I think the idea is to present the building in a positive light to create interest.
Right.
Look, there's nothing, and even initial interest. There's nothing that's going to beat getting out on the street and walking the neighborhood and actually seeing the building, or getting a broker to make an appointment to go into the building, but it's piquing interest. The virtual tour, again, as Sunny says, is expensive, but it's also, you're still arm's length. You're not there. You're not in it. And so I'm not sure that for the expense and what you're getting for it, how relevant a virtual tour would be. Perhaps if you're living in California and you want to come to New York, possibly.
Well, and if we discover that this particular building that we're working on, it wants to appeal to that market who cannot be here physically to tour the building, then yes, it's worth the investment. So it
Yes.
all has to do with who the ideal buyer is, and to not go into an expense of investing in a piece of technology or in something additional that isn't aligned with who your ideal buyer is. And that's the most important thing in anything, business, organizations, real estate. It doesn't matter. Every type of business that I've ever worked with, that if they don't have a clear idea of their ideal customer, patient, buyer, etc., then they can't effectively compete because they are not having a right conversation with the right people on their public facing media.
So how would one approach, this would be a discussion with a board, with management, with real estate brokers, getting everybody in the same room or on a Zoom call and
Yes.
coming up with a list of questions.
Yes. We have a whole process that sometimes involves a little bit of homework, because some of this stuff you really have to think about, because very few buildings, very few communities have actually ever really thought about who the ideal resident is of that building. And once in every single time and we've ever done this with any type of business or organization or anything, people realize, wow, I know a lot more than I thought I did about who the ideal is. And I never thought of it this way. So instead of saying, our building is great for anybody who can afford it, you can say, our building is great for couples who have 2 children who are moving to this neighborhood because this school is nearby and this playground is right here and this extracurricular activity is here, or this couple is wants to move. We want to attract the couple who has just sold their house in the suburbs and they're empty nesters, and finally they can have their New York life. Now imagine the different conversation in marketing, in the content that would be connecting with those 2 different types of buyers. And that is what really understanding your ideal buyer is.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
When
It's really fun though. It's like, it really uncovers a lot.
It's like a little game of psychology, right?
Yeah, I mean,
and then you're becoming like a little matchmaker.
I did this with Marilyn.
Yep, and here we are.
And here we are a few years later.
And that process is very similar to our interior design process.
Yes.
Where we feel it's very important not only to have a cross section, which is typically a board or a subcommittee of the board that will speak on behalf of the building with regard to what the image or the image of the building, what the brand of the building is, to keep using that word.
Yeah.
But also we like to reach out to all of the residents on some level for them to participate as well, in terms of confirming who the lobby and the hallways and the amenity spaces are for and how they're going to be used. It is definitely a communal process, whether it's interior design or whether it's the marketing, the branding.
Yeah.
It's never done by one person.
No.
And a building, I always find, and I always say to the buildings, you may not all like whatever is being presented, but the one thing you all have in common is you all have chosen to live in this building, in this location, so you do have things in common. And it's really picking up on, the talent is picking up on what those common attributes are. And that's what Betsy does, that's what Sunny does, that's what we do. And that's why it's a package situation. All right, let's see, we have another question here. How can a board present this idea of highlighting our building on a website? Would those board members say we are not real estate agents, business and of selling apartments? Maybe push the concept of branding.
Mhm.
How can a board president?
So what you're saying, Kendra, is that the board members are going to say, well, why should we do this? We're not in the business of selling apartments. And
Mm.
the bottom line is that the health of your co-op or condo community has a lot to do with whether there are units that are trying to be sold or not. And and also there having a website for your building, it adds prestige even during the times when nobody is buying. And you might have, there might be someone who calls and says, could you please let me know if a unit opens up in your building, because I just looked at your website and this is exactly what we want.
Yes.
The website doesn't have to be selling, and what we did on the boho, as you can see, we weren't trying to sell anything. We were just talking about what a wonderful experience it is to live there. And oh, by the way, click this link to see if anything's available. Okay, so we weren't really, I mean, there is a fine line, and we can be as salesy or as unsalesy as the building wants. It all has to do with content.
Yep.
You know, it's interesting as I listen to you say that. I know there have been times where I have even asked a building superintendent, does he know of anything or she know of anything coming
Right,
onto the market?
right, right.
And just to be able to give your building staff, the real estate community, board members, just a simple website, a place to go so
Mhm.
that they can confirm or not confirm what either what's available.
Right.
But again, like Betsy's saying, something that you're proud of.
Right.
And it's
It sets
incredible.
you apart. It makes you stand out. It makes your building stand out. So yes, it can help sell. Yes, I understand that it could be a challenge to convince board members who never thought of their building as having a brand or needing a brand that this might be necessary. It is taking a look at the future also
Yes.
of how is your building going to compete with all these flashy, new, sexy buildings that have gone up that want the people that you want to live in your building.
Right.
Mhm.
Same, it's potentially the same market.
Exactly.
You may not have the same amenities, but those buildings are right up against you. They're
Right.
right next to you. And if the neighborhood, the school system is something convenience to their work or convenience to a subway when we get back to taking subways, um, convenience to other family members, whatever it is that draws them to the neighborhood is a matter of all of those things, and you're competing against this new construction.
Yeah.
And it just seems to make sense to us,
Yeah.
the three of us, that this is a very valuable tool. I know we're going to have to wrap this up. I know I promised that I had some exciting news to tell you. As a result of this collaboration today, we are announcing Sygrove Branding Services, where we will be available to discuss your building, whether we've designed it or not. We're happy to take a look and brainstorm and see if a new website and a new presence out in the world is something for you. So keep that in mind.
Yes.
And it's exciting times. It's very
Yeah.
exciting times.
Yes.
Are there any other questions or comments that you would like to bring up while we have like 3 minutes left? Oh, and by the way, how do people get in touch with you, Marilyn?
I don't know if the cooperator sent something out, but we
You
are.
can type it into the, we can type your email address into the chat for panelists and attendees.
Let's see. Chat, panelists and attendees. Yes.
Yeah, I think that just to sum it up, how this really, because Marilyn and Sunny and we collaborate on Marilyn's web presence,
Website.
Sygrove. And I think that, the thing that kind of hit all of us, and I brought it up before, but I still think it's so important, is that so many of Marilyn's clients invest hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars,
Millions.
refurbishing and renovating and redecorating their public spaces, and nobody ever gets to see them unless they're actually standing in the building. And
So we just got a reminder that actually, because we're being recorded, the information in order to contact us would be through Sygrove Associates Design Group, Inc., Marilyn Sygrove. Our office number is 212-757-0631, or you could
Sygrove.com.
right, you can go through sygrove.com and look at our beautiful website that was done by these two fabulous women, and we're very excited. Thank you so much for
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank
Everybody
you.
Safe, healthy, enjoy spring.
Yes.
Bye.
This concludes today's discussion. Thank you all again for your participation. We hope you found it interesting and informative. This webinar will be made available to stream on demand in the coming days at cooperatorevents.com. Please feel free to share it, follow us on social media to stay informed.